Well, welcome everybody. It's a great honor and pleasure to have our speaker, who founded the London's Temple Gallery and who has been the author of Icons and the Mystical Origins of Christianity. So we are absolutely delighted that Richard Temple is honoring us by speaking today on a topic that is of great interest to a number in the room. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. We can have a nice down. So we start with this gentleman. I'm sure you know all about, or Ios, Dionysios, or Areopagitis. You all know about Dionysius the Areopagite? Yes. He is really the reference point, and it's good to start with an image of him. This is from one of the great Serbian the figure. Hence this marvelous decorative geometric and the great looming form and his presence. This is really the essence of the idea of the portrait icon. It's never a likeness of the physical person, but the dematerializing takes us into out of the visible world into the invisible world. We live in the visible world, and we relate to it through our faculties and our senses, and it keeps us at a certain level. We'll be talking about levels, and I think it's important that for humanity, this idea of levels is going to be very, very important. So you all know about Dionysius the Areopagite. I don't have to give a talk explaining the cosmic the celestial hierarchies. Very unusual for me to talk to people who share these interests. The 9 choirs of angels. And I had a period reading the Enneads at one time, and I put together a kind of similar hierarchy. Again, you will be familiar with this terminology and this hierarchical idea of the stages of the cosmos. I don't think anybody would doubt that Dionysius did little more than change the terminology, but the basic concepts of the hierarchical series of levels or stages, in his case, powers, dominions, thrones, in the terminology of the Neoplatonists, celestial intelligences, supernals, daemons, all this. So what we're trying to establish is this idea of cosmic hierarchy. And just to amuse myself the other day, I occasionally surf around the internet looking at what the latest NASA diagrams have, and I put this together and showed it to a scientific friend of mine, and he didn't dismiss it completely, but we have another hierarchy that astrophysics today use this kind of terminology. From planets, we go to stars, solar systems, star clusters, what they call the local group, galaxy clusters, superclusters, the universe, and this term, well, the new to me, the multiverse. So, to make it less theoretical, another beautiful painting I found, to make it nearer a real experience, say, this sense of incredible, overwhelming awe and wonder. If we're ever lucky enough to find an unpolluted night with a clear sky, these absolutely amazing impressions one gets of planets and the Milky Way. It's another image I like very much. So it brings, in a way, you could say, an emotional sense to this theory of cosmic hierarchy. This is another view of the universe, or one bit of the universe. The interesting bit is the 10 million light years, which is the one short line in the center, where we are now the local group which has disappeared, but we see on the right the Virgo cluster and some of the Virgo groups. And this is an image of the universe, again, from one of these, I think it's NASA who produced it, where even the Virgo supercluster has disappeared as a dot. And 1 billion light years is just that small fragment. So I haven't actually measured it, but it looks like 15 or 20 billion light years from one side to incomprehensible numbers. In other words, utterly beyond what makes any sense to the mind. But I'm interested to see, yes, here are my version of 3 different hierarchies. The angelic hierarchy of Dionysus the Areopagite, the one on the left, the astrophysics version of the cosmic hierarchy, and the Neoplatonic, the great chain of being. Simply to establish what is sort of the background to what I'm going to try and talk about in terms of some of these images. This is an icon from the, I think, 8th or 9th, possibly even the 9th century, in St. Catherine's Monastery on Mount Sinai. So we have not a circle, but an egg shape, and we have the starry background, and we have the heavens on my throne, the earth is my footstool, and I see them as the same, somehow related. Go back a minute, sorry. This idea of the conception of the universe as a circle or an egg. The image of the deity occupying this entire space, so to speak. And it interests me that theologians, philosophers, 1500, 2000 years ago could apparently arrive at a similar concept, even a similar image that modern astrophysics can come near to. Sorry, I'm going in the wrong direction. Yes. So this is a magnificent icon. It's in the Tretyakov Gallery in Moscow. It's much debated whether it's by a Russian icon painter or a Russian painter trained by a Greek, or I think most likely one of the great Greek figures that were in Moscow. After the fall of Constantinople, there were 2 enormous institutions in Moscow, which by then had declared themselves the Third Rome. And we would think of them as universities. In fact, they were monasteries, each with over 1,000 Greek monks and theologians and high-ranking members of representatives of the Byzantine Church or the Constantinopolitan Church. And they brought with them, of course, the icon painting tradition and various mystical traditions, in particular the Hesychast tradition. We forget, it's a popular idea that the Renaissance humanism began in Florence when scholars from Constantinople came to the conference in Florence in the late 1430s. We forget that that was only a handful of Greeks, and the vast majority all went to Moscow, which by becoming the Third Rome was guaranteeing the mystical continuity of the church. And a transfer was made of something that had achieved very great heights of spiritual knowledge, theology, mystical contemplative practices, developed in the East, in Constantinople, in Mount Athos, and with its origins, of course, older in the desert. So this image of Christ, again, the angelic world represented in this egg, the four evangelists in the red corners, and the tremendous force, power expressed by the beauty of the object as a work of art. Although, as I'm sure you know, icons were never intended as art in the aesthetic sense that we understand. The art was always in the service of the theology, and I would say in certain schools, mystical theology, the Hesychast practice. This is a well-known image from Palermo, if you know this. So we see that in this period, the 1100s, 1200s, 1300s, 1400s, the cosmic idea and the relationship to imagery is fairly universal. Circles, stars, the great cosmic world inhabited by God as a cosmic figure. So the well-known Hermetic phrase, as above, so below, brings us into the picture. I'm always interested in how to transition from conceptual and theoretical approach to experience, to a lived experience. This is one of the famous phrases to do with the esoteric traditions of Christianity, the occult traditions. The extended version of the complete is as above, so below, as without, so within, as the universe, so the soul. So this is a photograph, black and white photograph, because the church was destroyed in the 1920s in southern Turkey, near present-day Izmir, a great church of the 1100s. And this apse shows us some of the ideas that we're speaking about. The gold ground, and we see it as gold, of course, in mosaic, representing the firmament of the cosmos. The higher divine, higher stages, the circle from which great emanations of energy as light coming down. A friend of mine translated the inscription, "Thou hast conceived him before time." I'm not sure where that comes from, but all this is to take us out of the visible world, the material world, which we as humanity occupy, and through our faculties are tied to. And everything we're talking about is, you could say, the invisible world, the world not perceptible to the rational mind or to be apprehended by the physical senses, and a world only explored by I would have to say, mystical practices associated with what began in the desert in the great Coptic churches which still exist at St. Catherine's Monastery on Sinai. This intense practice of rigorous discipline. You might find it today in the Zen monastery in Japan, but the monastic tradition of Christianity, with rigorous physical demands, mental demands, spiritual demands, aim to create ultimately a transformation of being, an inner transformation of the practitioner of hesychastic practice. I assume you're familiar when I say hesychasm. Yes. So this idea that this magnificent grandeur of the cosmos has its counterpart within us is part of how this kind of language of imagery explored by people who, in a sense, have been there in their spiritual life, in their inner life. This is a well-known pre-iconoclast image of the 6th, 7th century from St. Catherine's Monastery on Mount Sinai, currently in the Metropolitan Museum in New York as part of the Africa Byzantium exhibition, after which it will tour several museums in America. And there's quite a lot to say about this. It appears at first glance as a conventional image of the enthroned Mother of God presenting the Christ child to the world. She's accompanied by, on her right, St. Basil the Great. We recognize him with his long black pointed beard, and on her left are warriors, the youthful St. George. And we see in the background two angels, very Hellenistic figures, as was the style of the period, and they look upwards. And there the details are less clear, but if we look at a detail here, we see just the rim of a circle from which descends a ray of light, and you can make it out the hand of the Almighty, the hand of God. So here, this cosmic hierarchy is implied in these apparently less important details of what's going on in the background of the picture. And the light, of course, is the light that fills the universe, lights the figures, and comes down through the angelic world. In other words, the different stages of the cosmic, yes, the cosmic descent. Here's one of those medieval images of the cosmos. I think it's Cosmos Indica Justus, and I've borrowed it to make playing around with the images to make sense of the symbolic implications of the way the icon painter put the two angels and the rim of the circle, so that I sometimes think that all icons are cosmic diagrams. In fact, well, it's a sort of generalization, but is because this higher is present by implication, and in the period that we're talking about here in the 6th century, and in various periods, again in the 14th century and in between, up until the end of the golden age of icon painting, which is the end of the 16th century, where the icon painting schools in various monasteries combined sometimes with schools of hesychast mystical practice. If you get both, you get something that is completely extraordinary, beyond art in the normal sense. People who have lived this inner ascent and found ways, the visual language, to express it. Always, we need reminding that the cosmos is not out there, but this idea of being within. And this discovery of the cosmos within is central to the mystical practices of the hesychasts and the mystical theology that was being evolved in those first 1,000 years or so of Christianity, particularly in the East. So another key person in all this is Gregory Palamas, the reviver of hesychasm in Mount Athos. He was Archbishop of Thessaloniki, and hesychasm had never died out. Its origins are the Desert Fathers, of course, but there was a very great revival. Probably you know this. His dates are 1360 to 1420, approximately, that he's active. Most historians know about the hesychast controversy, and they don't look much beyond Barlam, another theologian, had gone to Mount Athos and found all the monks what he called contemplating their own navels. That's the origin of that expression, I believe. Marched off to the Patriarch in Constantinople and denounced them as heretics. You may know this story. You know about Gregory Palamas? Yes, I don't need to tell it in detail. But what is interesting is this icon or image of St. Gregory, recently discovered in the Vatopedi, one of the chapels in Vatopedi, painted probably within 20 or 30 years of he was canonized quite soon after his death. And again, the way he's painted is a key. I've always found personally, and I wonder, I like to try and share this, because we have an enormous help here from what today we would call art, the language of art, which is not necessarily intellectual. I mean, artists, of course, use the tradition of symbolism and the tradition language very, very, very fixed, in fact. But the way we see St. Gregory, it's kind of informal, very human, very vulnerable, you could say. And yet at the same time, we feel his inner focus, his attention, his look, inclusive of the world, the physical world, and his contact with the higher, both going on. And whoever painted this lived this life, lived this experience, and could express it in the particular resonance. This is my experience, that we find in looking at the image, or in this case, a screen image of the image. This is a well-known icon, also in Vatopedi, the youthful St. George, same sort of date, second half of the 14th century. And it's so interesting that, you know, the warrior is not depicted with any sort of aggression or brutality, or because of course it's nothing to do with what we call war. Those of you who study the Philokalia will know the expression inner warfare or spiritual warfare. So this search to live the spiritual life, to ascend the different stages, cosmic stages that have their counterpart within the human being, and the difficulties that need to be overcome on the pathway, involve this idea of the spiritual warrior. And again, we see the extraordinary youthfulness of the figure, painted with great tenderness, and again, his look, partly a glance on infinity, partly a glance to include us, and a sense of an inner awakened state, the alive inner awakened state. Just en passant, I'm always interested to see the way the armor has this strange window at the chest. And I've seen other examples of St. George with the way the painter paints a swirling circle. And I feel it must be an allusion to the heart, to the inner. And here indeed is the famous icon from St. Catherine's from the 12th century of the ladder of John Climacus. And it's exactly about what I'm trying to share with you, this, you know the image, of course, very well-known image. The angelic world is there, the highest place in the universe, we see the little quadrant representing the circle of the higher divine world or heaven, the progress of the monks led by St. John, and not always progress, some of them failing. So there's a sense of an extraordinary endeavor, where most people would write it off as hardly more than a cartoon image of real spiritual work. So, a well-known icon in the Russian Museum in St. Petersburg, 14th century or 15th century Novgorodian icon of St. George and the Dragon. And we can look at this in some detail because it's a long way from, the Uccello George and the Dragon or the Raphael that we see in the National Gallery, which is basically a struggle between a man and a beast with all the agitation and the physical struggle. The overwhelming feeling when one stands and contemplates the icon is one of peace, of balance, of order, achieved by marvelous artistic methods. The movement of the leap of the charger from the lower left to the upper right, this great diagonal movement is cancelled by the St. George's lance. So the action is stilled, held frozen for a moment. And then the forms, this marvelous disposition of the three different areas of the red, give a balance, a very even balance. St. George doesn't hate the dragon. He looks with love at the dragon when the dragon accepts. So again, we are not in the visible world, we're not in the physical world, we are in the invisible world, in the spiritual world. But the elements in the icon, in the background, are the cosmos. We see in the top right-hand corner the familiar quadrant representing the circle. From it, the hand of God. This red background, you could call it the world of celestial intelligences in Neoplatonic terminology, the firmament in Christian terminology. And then this strange moon-like atmosphere landscape is the world of matter. Below the world of matter, the deeper, darker levels, the level of non-being from which emerges the serpent. And if you remember in the original version, St. George doesn't kill the dragon, he tames the dragon. So this imagery is a commentary on order in the lower world, brought through divine descending energies. It's interesting if we take the protagonists out and look just at the background. This is, yes, the simple version of the cosmic diagram, one might call it. And that is a familiar background in many, many icons. So this is a classic image of the evangelist St. John with his disciple Prochorus. The traditional explanation of the mountains is that it's the island of Patmos. But the way I think mountains are places of upper and lower, ascending and descending. The fact that both figures don't touch the material physical world. They're seated on stools and their feet are on footstools. So they're already one level above the level of matter. We just see the fragment of the top left-hand corner of the quadrant from which descends the divine light, the divine spirit. St. John is almost inflated by the reception of this descending cosmic energy, to which he turns, which he receives, and by his gesture he transmits it to his disciple Prochorus. Prochorus in his turn transmits it to paper, maybe the world of matter, and in compositional terms, from the point of view of the symbolism, it's not a coincidence that Prochorus sits in front of the cave, the lower world, at the level of non-being. And again, if we look at just the background, we have the same elements creating the cosmic diagram, against which the image is a commentary on how, through the action, in this case of the evangelist, through his personal spiritual endeavor, the higher descends to the lower. The same as the work of St. George, the spiritual warrior. So, a very famous, a well-known Novgorodian icon of the 1470s. This one is in Vicenza, in a not very well-known museum in Vicenza. It's a classic example of the famous Novgorod school of icon painting of the 15th century. I don't have to go through the same process, but we see again here it's a semicircle with the mountain and the cave. So this is the cosmological background, so to speak, the commentary on the events taking place in the foreground. The angels, the presence of angels, a reminder of the angelic hierarchy. The journey of the three kings, and down below what's called the temptation of St. Joseph. The devil disguised as one of the shepherds, putting doubt into the mind of Joseph. And on the right, the figures of the midwives bathing the newly born child. So this event, the nativity, pictured in this way, is the tradition, the icon painting tradition's way taking the event out of the material world and telling us that it's a purely spiritual or cosmological event. And again, this marvelous harmony of colour and balance of forms. Although the event is dramatic, the art is peaceful, has a tranquility, has an order, has a balance. This is the famous anastasis in the Cora monastery in Constantinople. This is very interesting because here the universe is quite literally turned inside out. We don't see in the top part the quadrant or the semicircle representing the divine world. The divine world surrounds in a wonderful Vesica Isis, Christ himself. And so the higher has come down to the lower in order to rescue Adam and Eve from tombs. And so it's a cosmic cataclysm what has happened of incredible drama. And yet it's painted with this, and it's huge. You've probably seen it, many of you. 9 meters across, this fresco. It's the most astonishing, one of the most astonishing works of art that you can see. And so the question, the way, is where does this take place? Unlike our Western Sunday school ideas about the great events of Scripture and the pictures that illustrate them, this is outside time, as we saw in the inscription of the 12th century Standing Virgin earlier. These events take place outside time and not in the three-dimensional space that we live in and which we are tied to through the senses and the faculties. So I won't attempt to answer this question, of course, but to me the wonder is that what we would call art, the painter, the painting, the image, can suggest to us by intuition, by emotion, by instinct, the reality of where this event takes place. In other words, it sounds trite to say within the soul, but I don't believe that an artist painting this was not on the spiritual path of John Clivicus on whichever stage of the ladder. And that is the characteristic of, in general, icon painting up until towards the end of the 16th century. After that, the forms exist, but the inner content is not so readily available. The marvel of icons, of course, that the tradition demanded conscientious adherence to the form. Very, very great demand. So even if the inner content is not necessarily lived, the artist is simply copying or working within this tradition, the symbolism of the forms allows a reconstruction or a rediscovery of the origins. What had been going on in when Christianity was first developing a language of images in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th century. So I find myself often telling people, one of my jobs is taking people to the great ancient sacred places. And in general, many people don't know how to look at art. And I find myself saying, it's like listening to music. Not mental, it's not intellectual, it's not conceptual, it is allow it to speak to the intuition as an instinctive and as an organic event. And all the meaning will pass, maybe bypass the mind and speak directly to the heart. It's astonishing how, in a way, limited our views in the West, post-Renaissance and post-Enlightenment, are with regard to medieval and Byzantine ideas about these great theological concepts and the language of imagery and symbolism that could express it. You see, here's a Russian icon of the 15th century of the same theme, and a very mysterious picture. The conception of here the divine world is the complete circle, as Christ descends, breaks open the gates of hell, rescues Adam and Eve, but painted with such simplicity, a kind of laconic understatement. And yet the appeal of the image, as an image, is compelling. It's not boring. So this use of silence, this feeling of silence that pervades the image, and as we look at it, pervades one's own inner responses in a way. My own experience, certainly. I think it's a marvel that you don't have to be a theologian, you don't have to be a philosopher, you don't have to be an art historian, you don't have to be an art expert, but it is so expressive. And yes, we end with Dionysus the Areopagite. This is a mosaic from Ozias Lucas from the middle Byzantine period, from the 10th century. I can't help spending a moment looking at his look. He looks so unassuming, so unpretentious, so there's a picture of humility. This very great thinker. His body language, his posture, the hand in front of the heart, the holy book, the gospel on his hand, on the hand covered, of course. I think that's where we'll finish.